The US has accused an Indian of allegedly plotting to kill Khalistani terrorist Gurpatwant Singh Pannun. According to a charge sheet that was filed by the US Department of Justice, a man named Nikhil Gupta worked with an unnamed Indian official to set up a meeting with an undercover agent tasked with eliminating Pannun on US soil. The indictment reveals that the plot to assassinate Gurpatwant Pannun was orchestrated by an employee of an Indian government agency, self-identifying as a quote-unquote senior field officer responsible for security management and intelligence. The individual claims to have served in India's Central Reserve Police Force, receiving training in battlecraft and weaponry. And he's been referred as CC1 in the indictment, and this government employee had recruited a man called Nikhil Gupta in May to carry out the assassination. The indictment says that Gupta contacted an individual that he believed to be a criminal associate to help find a hitman to carry out the killing. But the individual actually was a confidential source who was working with the DEA. Now, the confidential source then introduced Gupta to a purported hitman, but the individual was actually a DEA agent, according to the indictment. It is being alleged that a payment of $100,000, that's about 1 lakh rupees, was to be made for the job. Now, the MEA says that it takes the charges very seriously and has set up a high-level probe panel to examine the issue. Pannun holds dual citizenship for United States and Canada and has very recently threatened to bomb Air India as well. The NIA has filed a case against him in this matter. We have reactions that are coming across from the Ministry of External Affairs, but before that, joining me here in the studio is my colleague and Executive Editor for Strategic Affairs, Aditya Rajkol. Aditya, many thanks for joining with us here. We've been talking about this Khalistan issue ever since the resurgence of Khalistan. You've been doing some great documentaries on that as well. But take a look at what's happening in the past couple of months. That Time article that came out, you had the Amritpal issue, that Nijjar killing happened, him being killed on Canadian soil. India-Canada relations got currently soured. We've just recently opened the visa applications again for all those people who want to travel. Your first initial comments, before we delve into the hypocrisy, the dichotomy, and how the stand on terror has been exposed by the West yet again, your initial comments on what's really happening. How are you taking a look at all of this? Can you help the viewers understand what's happening?
Well, the first reaction that I had was of shock and disbelief. But then I went through the documents that were released yesterday by the Department of Justice in United States that clearly say that, you know, a man called Nikhil Gupta, who has been later in June arrested by Czech Republic and has been extradited since then to the United States and is in US custody. Now, it's very important to go through those documents, those 15 pages, to realize that there's no evidence. There is simply no evidence that United States has. They've just believed some character called Nikhil Gupta, who himself seems to be a dubious character, a suspicious man who does not have any direct links or is a representative of the government of India. Apart from some wild phone calls that the US, CIA and others say they have,
which they haven't put out in the open.
Which they haven't put out in the open, and it could be anybody. We know about the gangsters that are operating in Punjab, mostly sitting in Canada, US and UK, that have killed people even in Indian Punjab, including Sidhu Moosewala.
Right.
So that's an open case. There's no, nothing new being revealed here. There are gangsters, there are drug traffickers that are involved in killings in Indian Punjab, that are involved in killings in Canada. And India has been warning Canada and US for a very long time that take action against the organized crime syndicate and the Khalistani network, otherwise it will be a problem in your own backyard. And that's what these US and Canada are facing. Of course, the US has shared some details with the Indian counterparts, and India on the basis of that has ordered a probe, which only suggests that India takes these matters very seriously. But again, who is this Nikhil Gupta? Nobody knows who this Nikhil Gupta character is. Who was he in touch with in India or in the United States?
Another question is about this purported guy who was working with the DEA, this source. Who is this person? Who's the DEA source? That you're right, there is not much to corroborate what has been written in that indictment. But this stand on on terror by the West, and this dichotomy that has been exposed yet again, hasn't it? I was speaking to Ambassador Goel in the morning. Several examples that he had given, to the viewers as well, about how military movement in the Middle East, when United States perspective is to be looked at, how they tackle terror, and it's okay when they're doing it. But when we're trying to raise a voice of concern that, look, maybe the snake is rearing its head again in your backyard, you don't want to do it owing to political convenience.
The West over the last few years, and especially in the last 2 years, has been a little jittery. With the way India has approached things. India's independent stance on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. India's independent thinking in the Israel-Hamas conflict. India talking about this not being an era of war. India speaking about the humanitarian aid that should be given to people both in Gaza as well as in Ukraine and other places. Apart from that, India being a very important player in a global peacenik. So I think the US seems to be a little jittery in that regard. And of course, when Canada was called out, the kind of embarrassment that Justin Trudeau faced both in India as well as in his home country Canada wasn't easy for the Five Eyes intelligence to digest, more so for US and Canada. So I think they do not have much evidence at this particular stage, and the question can be asked to them that what action have you taken against organized crime? What action have you taken against the Khalistani networks? There are 26 extradition requests that have been sent out to Canada in the last 15 years. No action has been taken against them.
None at all.
None at all. And it clearly indicates the hypocrisy also of the West when it comes to dealing with terrorism, as you rightly pointed out. You know, there is this Western idea of democracy which they want to apply across South Asia and across the globe. And if somebody does not abide by it, of course they don't like it. They don't like the kind of democracy that was there in Afghanistan. So they attacked it, and when they couldn't do much, they withdrew. Similarly with India, Pakistan and other countries as well, they want their idea of democracy and their viewpoint of the fight against terrorism to be applicable. They do not want India to emerge as a leader of the global south. They do not want India to emerge as the most vocal leading voice against terrorism, against radicalization, because they are jittery. So I think it's important to, wait and watch what happens in this particular case, because for long, Khalistani so-called activism and terrorism has been used to extend and expand the foreign policy goals of US and Canada for a very long time, even UK for that matter. So India does not need to worry. These are tactics that are applied by the West to apply pressure.
Right.
And India has nothing to hide. India believes in fighting terrorism, in radicalization. It was okay to hit Soleimani with a drone strike. It was okay to send US Navy SEALs in Pakistan, violating the sovereignty both of Pakistan and Iran. But,
but it was needed.
It was needed. But they do not believe in acting against the Khalistani terrorism in the same way.
Which is where they end up weaponizing human rights per se as well.
Absolutely.
And whilst we're talking about all of this, because every time I see the Prime Minister meeting with Joe Biden, whether it be that full state visit in the United States or Biden here during the G20, which is again one of those prominent places where India pretty much made it clear to the world that this is a unique summit, this is voice of the global south, and you'll have to listen to us this time around, and this is not going to change, we're here to stay. But I'm more interested in understanding what's going to happen between the US-India relations in this particular situation, because the bonhomie between these two world leaders, they look like they're some lost brothers at the Kumbh Ka Mela, the way they shake hands and hug it out when the cameras are facing them. Do you think relationships are going to get sour? What's your opinion on that front?
I don't think so. I think this will continue for some time. But there will be diplomacy at play. Exactly what has happened with India and Canada. Visa was completely ended, and soon after, just in a matter of weeks, we've had the visa again being started. We also have backroom diplomacy dialogue that is underway. I can tell you now that two former High Commissioners that India had in Canada, Ajay Bisaria and Vikas Swarup, were recently in dialogue with the Canadian High Commissioner and the former Canadian High Commissioner Nadir Patel as well. So there is diplomacy at play, there is dialogue that is happening, and similar things will happen with US as well, and the Indian side will try to make US understand that these tactics are not going to work anymore. This is an India of today, not an India of yesterday, and India knows how to deal with these tactics and these pressure tactics.
Well, the Ministry of External Affairs, ladies and gentlemen, very recently conducted a press conference. They haven't given much information, and it's quite rightly understandable why they wouldn't want to do that, because there is diplomacy and dialogue that's taking place. Let's not jump the gun here. But let's listen in to how the Ministry of External Affairs, the spokesperson Arindam Bagchi, how did he navigate and tackle these kind of questions on Canada and the United States. Both listen in.
During the course of discussions with the US on bilateral security cooperation, the US side shared some inputs pertaining to nexus between organized criminals, gun runners, terrorists, other extremists. We take, of course, such inputs very seriously, and a high-level inquiry committee has been constituted to look into all the relevant aspects of the matter. And necessary follow-up action will be taken based on the findings of the inquiry committee. You would have seen this in our statements that we have issued. We cannot share any further information on such security matters. As regards the case against an individual that has been filed in a US court, allegedly linking him to an Indian official, this is a matter of concern. We have said, and let me reiterate, that this is also contrary to government policy. The nexus between organized crime, trafficking, gun running, and extremists at an international level is a serious issue for law enforcement agencies and organizations to consider. And it is precisely for that reason that a high-level inquiry committee has been constituted, and we will obviously be guided by its results. On the issue of Canada, insofar as Canada is concerned, we have said that they have consistently given space to anti-India extremists and violence, and that is actually the heart of the issue. Our diplomatic representatives in Canada have borne the brunt of this, so we expect the government of Canada to live up to its obligations under the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. We have also seen interference by Canadian diplomats in our internal affairs. We've said this from this podium, and that is obviously unacceptable.
Arindam Bagchi, spokesperson for the MEA, saying that India is taking all of this very seriously. Now, Aditya, even as India is taking this seriously, and like I said, let's not jump the gun, just a couple of brief questions. In terms of the senior officer that is being quoted that he's from the CRPF, he's got some battle tank, training, he's got weaponry training. I was speaking to Ambassador Goel in the morning, and he was of the opinion that CRPF don't get tank training, tank battle training. There are a lot of discrepancies in what the US thinks this CRPF guy is doing and what actually is happening with the CRPF training back at home. But senior official, does this raise an eyebrow?
Well, they are trying to frame the intelligence.
Considering you've gone through the 15 pages.
The US is trying to frame an Indian intelligence agency, more so the RNAW. But it doesn't have any definitive proof, it doesn't have any details, any evidence to point that out. I think this is just like a theatrical, some kind of a script that has been hatched by the US that clearly indicates that it's a senior field officer, we know who he is, he has had work with the CRPF in the past, he has battle training, not realizing that battle training is only given to, the army personnel or the NSG personnel or the commandos, and not the CRPF personnel, which is a central reserve police force. Only some units of it work near the border areas in Jammu and Kashmir, and they also do not operate in the border areas, but in the city limits of Srinagar and other districts, and are part of encounters with terrorists, not a war-like situation, or for instance, the armored corps of the army. So I think the entire story is not clear. I think US still needs to work on the script a little more.
Funny indictment, I'll tell you what. You don't really know where to put your finger on it. And let me tell you, Aditya, in my limited opinion, I think this is going to impact West's credibility when it comes to fighting terror and their anti-terror movement. That is certainly going to take a hit.
And the problem here is that they are going to blindly believe an arms supplier or a drug trafficker as a potential witness and the prime witness in this particular case, and not India, which is the largest and the biggest democracy in the world.
And asking the right questions.
And a very close ally of the United States. I mean, India has had a track record of fighting terrorism, radicalization, even calling out US and Canada when it has to on these same issues. And India has supported US's fight against terrorism for a very long time. So I think the US, the Canada and the West will have to reflect, will have to change their position and do some course correction in the coming weeks and months.
All right, Aditya, many thanks for joining with us here on this special edition. Let's see, we'll have to wait and find out as to what happens on both fronts, the West front and how the MEA is now going to move the chess pieces on this diplomatic chessboard. Many thanks for joining with us.